Good evening. This is Ed Noy, President of the Minnesota Woodworkers Guild. Welcome to our March 2022 edition of our monthly meeting. We're glad to have you along. We will continue to allow people to join the meeting as they come in. Please mute yourself if you are not muted. If you have something you'd like to contribute to the meeting or to ask a question, please use the chat feature of Zoom and type it in there, and we'll try to make sure we keep tabs on that. One of our program committee members, Lonnie Bryan, will be watching that, and I think I always keep an eye on that as well. I already mentioned, please keep yourself on mute. If at the end of the introduction here, we'll spend about 15 minutes on guild business. If at the end of that, anybody who would like to take a minute or so to talk about a project they're working on or show us a photo or something, we call it What's on Your Bench. Please send a chat message so we know who it is and what you want to talk about, and we'll find some time to do that. As always, we like to remind our members to take advantage of all the advantages offered by those companies who sponsor us, you know, the forest products and the wood crafts and the Rocklers of this world, where you can get really good discounts by showing them your membership cards. We work closely with them. A lot of them spend extra money and support our upcoming Northern Woods exhibition, as well as the Woodworkers Expo that we'll be having in the fall. Talking about Northern Woods, I was looking, I don't see Charlie Kasorik has joined the meeting. If you have Charlie, speak up. Charlie is the chair of our Northern Woods Exhibition Committee. And you know, that thing is coming up fast. This is the, the 8th of March. Maybe I'm a little slow on that, but anyway, the Northern Woods exhibition is coming up April 21 through 24 at Eden Prairie Center. Registration has been open for about a week. The number of early registrations is, I'll say, extremely disappointing. If you plan on entering the show, please take the time to go on our website, get your registration taken care of so we can get an idea of what we need to do for any planning details. Registration will close on April 10th, and that's to allow us an opportunity to get all the paperwork in order that we need so that our judges have information on the pieces, and we get the floor plan laid out and such. So please don't procrastinate to the very last minute. It really puts a strain on the program committee. We're nothing but a bunch of volunteers, and we can use all the help we can get from everybody. Richard Tendick, are you on? Would you like to talk a little bit about the fall seminar? I don't see Richard. All right. We've got a fall seminar coming up. Richard and Bob Krabby, who are both board members who are working on this, have identified a presenter, and they've been working with him to nail down this specific date. It will be one of the weekends in November. And as soon as we get the details ironed out on that, we will let everybody know. Woodworkers Expo. Ron, I did notice that you are on board. Can you go off of mute and give everybody an update on Woodworkers Expo?
Yes, the Woodworkers Expo is going to be at the Bloomington Armory again on September 24th. We have all the logistics in place. You can now see our poster by going to woodworkersexpo.org. And we are beginning to collect people for the expo and put together a seminars. And we're optimistic this year that there's going to be less COVID which means more participants. So we look forward to seeing you there.
Excellent. Thanks so
Ed,
much,
if,
Ron.
Ed, if I can say one more thing,
Oh, yeah.
back at the Northern Woods, we need volunteers to run the show booth. I think I have 6, and I could use as many as 48. So we've got a long ways to go.
Yeah. You know, this Northern Wood Show is a big deal for us. It's 4 days of continuous activity by quite a few members. The committee really needs the help of our membership. Now, you know you're going to be there at some time or other to see all the great pieces of woodwork and to talk to the makers and learn new techniques and new finishing methods and new joinery and get some design inspiration. So you're going to be there anyway. So let Ron know when you will be there to actually officially represent the guild and work for us. And the work you want, Ron, you want to talk a little bit about the work that's involved?
It's being at the table. It's kind of walking around the show, and you know, if anyone has any questions, you know, and if you run across somebody who's interested, has an interest in the guild, you know, to try and sell them a membership.
Right.
It's pretty easy.
Yeah, the work is not strenuous, but we need your presence there. So please, if you're thinking about it, drop Ron an email, let him know when you can be there, which shift you can fill in. They're 3-hour shifts, and he'll put you down, and we really would appreciate the help. We do have one other announcement. A little while ago, we sent out an email about a special project that Ken Jones has volunteered to coordinate, dealing with bridging. And Ken would like to give us an update on that activity. Ken, go ahead and unmute and fill us in.
Hi, I'm Ken Jones, and we started this project starting with the email. And since that time, I've received about 7 responses. Several of them, or 2 of them, are going to donate furniture on their own without asking for the 40% rebate or reimbursement. But I've got a couple other people that seem to have interested in doing the reimbursement. So I haven't heard anything recently, but that's all the responses I've gotten so far.
Well, that's good. And thank you for doing this, Ken. You know, the Guild is a volunteer organization. We can only run programs when we have people who are passionate about them and make them work. Ken came up with this idea. The board took a look at it, and we liked what Ken had to tell us about it. So we went ahead and decided to go ahead and back this up and provide 40% of the cost of materials for anyone who wants to build furniture pieces for the bridging program. So please contact Ken. Thank you, sir. Okay, what else we got? Oh, our tuition grant program. That terminated in February. At our February board meeting, we took a look at the entries we had. We had more than 2, so we had to do some head scratching. You know, this program, what it does, it issues a $1,000 tuition grant to 2 guild members that want to further their knowledge by taking some kind of course somewhere. So the 2 recipients, one is a veteran woodworker and a professional, and the other one is a novice woodworker. The veteran is someone who many of you probably already know. That's Jason Holtz. Besides building lots of furniture and doing it as a full-time occupation, one of the things that Jason has enjoyed for many, many years is guitars, and he's become interested in building them. And he's made a few, but he's going to make a trip to England to spend 2 weeks with a famous luthier over there. And if I can remember his name, I'd tell you who it is, but I can't. So he's going to use his $1,000 scholarship that way. And the other recipient is someone new to woodworking, Tiffany Wong. Tiffany is familiar with some basic Asian woodworking techniques, but would like to get more knowledgeable on Western woodworking. And she's going to be taking some local courses here through places like Makerspace and White Bear. And she'll be using her scholarship grant to cover those kinds of tuition costs. So we congratulate both of them for submitting their applications and have wished them both well in their education. And we will be learning about their educational opportunities later in the year when they've completed them. This meeting is being recorded, as all of our Zoom meetings have been recently. We certainly had enough technical difficulties in our learning curve, and we missed a couple of meetings. But last month's meeting, which was the shop tours of 5 of our members, we got that. It was a 2-hour video, got it up on our YouTube channel. We've already had 150 views of that. So I'm glad to see that our membership is taking advantage of this extra feature that we're able to offer. And of course, now this meeting, along with all of our monthly meetings, happen only because we have a small group of volunteers who we call our program committee. Mike is our program committee director, and he's recently recruited a new member who took the bull by the horns and organized this meeting, and we'll introduce you to him here in a few minutes. But we need at least 2 more people on that committee so that we can spread the work out. It takes quite a bit to organize these meetings that we have every month, coming up with topics, finding qualified presenters, setting up a venue. We're trying to have all of our meetings in person, but sometimes we do it like this in case of bad weather, or last month because we had 5 different venues to look at. It worked really great over Zoom. I was just looking at a comment that came in. We will handle that, Jeff. We really could use 2 more members of that program committee. Please give it some thought. If you're at all interested in spending a couple hours at a program committee meeting every couple of months and then organizing a meeting, please contact Mike Johnson. You can find him on our contacts list on our webpage. Let's see, I have no one who has come forth and wants to present anything from their bench. Normally at this time, when we have live meetings, we do door prizes. Because we can't send chisels and saws and things over the internet very well, what we do, we send out gift cards, and we can only do that after the meeting. So what we did last month, we sent out 8 $25 gift cards from Rockler to the following members who attended last month's meeting: Tom Mackey, Don Bergquist, Lyle Hookham, Greg Loxterkamp, John Magnuson, Mark Waddell, Amelia Kennedy, and Polk Burleson. And we'll do the same this month. We'll take the list of participants at the end of this meeting that we get from our friends at Zoom, and we'll randomly select members that will get a $25 gift card. It will either be Rockler or Woodcraft. We haven't purchased the cards yet. Mike Nesnadal just sent me a note. He says he wants 2 minutes to show us something. So Mike, this is your time. Go ahead. Mike, we don't see anything, and the audio is terrible. Please mute yourself. All right. If you can fix that later, we'll invite you back. All right, so I mentioned that we have a new member of the program committee. That's Matt Lebeau. I'm going to introduce Matt at this time, and he's going to introduce our speaker. Take it away, Matt.
Thanks, Ed. I'll make it short and quick so we can get down to tonight's agenda, which is SketchUp with Dave Richards. He's been doing SketchUp. I think we were just chatting earlier. It seems like it's close to almost 20 years now. He had in his bio 15 years, but it looks like he's getting closer to 20 now. So he's been doing it for a while anyhow. And he's going to walk us through some of the steps for doing SketchUp. He does mostly woodworking projects. He's been a contributor to finewoodworking.com. He wrote a book, so he's done it all. He lives in Rochester with his wife, son, and a dog. Retired from Mayo College of Medicine. And I'm looking forward to it because I was playing with SketchUp. I'm just new to it. And so I'm looking forward to Dave's advice and help on how to get a handle on this, or at least get started on it anyhow. So Dave, go ahead, take it away.
All right, thank you very much. Let me see if I can get this thing to work. You know, that technical thing. Hopefully that's playing now. So thank you, Matt and Mike and the rest of the program team and everybody. So as you know, my name's Dave Richards, and we're going to talk about SketchUp. And see if we can make this, let's see if we can make this work. SketchUp, I really want to quickly just cover a few little things about it. SketchUp was originally the design or the idea of an architect who wanted a digital version of sketching on a napkin. He didn't want to get deep into something like AutoCAD or anything like that. What it's turned out to be, though, is really a neat tool for anyone who wants to do visualization of projects, because you can create a three-dimensional project that anybody can look at and understand what it is you're thinking about. There are a number of versions of SketchUp. The current Pro version is 2022. I'm not going to read all of this stuff. Free versions for hobby use are SketchUp 2017 Make, which, although it's getting a little long in the tooth, it's still functional. There's SketchUp Free, which is a web-based version that's free for hobby use, and SketchUp Shop, which along with SketchUp Pro, are intended for commercial use, although certainly hobbyists can use those. The paid versions, so Pro and Shop, are subscription model things like pretty much every software on the market today. I've been, as Matt said, I've been using SketchUp for a long time, since 2003, hard to say that now. I've been an authorized trainer for SketchUp since 2006, and I've been working as a contract employee for Fine Woodworking Magazine since 2007, doing blog posts about using SketchUp, and I create plans for projects I feature in the magazine. And as an example, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on these slides, but this table here was done for plans for Fine Woodworking. The vise was done for somebody in North Carolina, again, plans. Here are a few other examples. The coffee table and the bed were both done for Fine Woodworking. The piece on the lower left here was mostly done to show somebody how to create the appearance of a live edge slab table. And the piece on the right was for somebody who wanted to see trying to work out how to get a keyboard and a desk sort of a thing together. Some other pieces, the piece on the left is, top left, is currently being built by a woodworker in Georgia. It was a piece I designed for a client of his. The spinning wheels were done just for the fun of it. And the jig on the lower left is a parallel clamping jig for gluing up small panels, something I've had in my own shop for about, I don't know, longer than I've been using SketchUp, that's for sure. And very useful little jig. Another example, this was done for a group in North Carolina that does, they go to different woodworking shows and things like that, and they have some mini lathes that they put on stands like this so that people using wheelchairs or short people, kids can use these lathes, and they're adjustable and can be knocked down and that sort of thing. SketchUp's really handy for doing things where you just want to show somebody how something goes together. This is a plan that I did for a table. I actually did this table some years ago, and I was contacted by a retired naval architect who wanted to build it. So I made a plan for him. And in reality, this plan prints out on 3-foot by 4-foot paper, and all of these curves that you see like on the left side here and up at the top and down at the bottom will print at full size so they can be lifted for creating patterns for using a router if you want. We'll come back to that in a minute, and let's do this.
Dave,
Yes.
just as a question, what version of SketchUp would you recommend for a hobbyist that is just new at it?
So
SketchUp.
it depends. I would suggest you might, for a hobbyist, you might start with SketchUp 2017 Make. That's free for hobby use. And actually, let's go back to this for a moment. So you can get all of the versions, the desktop versions of SketchUp that are available through the link that I've just highlighted there. They also offer a web version called SketchUp Free and the beauty of that is it'll run on anything. It'll run on a Chromebook or, it's really designed to be it runs in a web browser. So if you can open a web browser, you can open it. You do need a mouse to be able to work with it, or at least a touchpad, but a mouse is a better option. But one or the other of those is nice. The web-based version, which you'd get from app.sketchup.com, is, because it runs in a web browser, it's also operating system agnostic, meaning that it doesn't matter if you're using Linux or Chrome, it'll work. So a couple of different options there. The Pro version adds a bunch of capabilities that even some hobbyists might find useful, but at least to start with, I'd say either of those two versions. So what I was thinking I would do is start here, and now I am working in SketchUp 2022. So the Pro version, because I'm using that, I can't actually even run the free version, but what I'm going to do can all be done in any version of SketchUp. And I don't want to spend all night. I could spend all night modeling some furniture, but most of you probably will want to go to bed at some point, so I won't. So I'm going to just draw a simple project. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail because I'd also like to get to some Q&A stuff if we can do that. So I won't go into a ton of details about working in SketchUp or, but I want to kind of show you my workflow. I'm talking with my hands. I hope you can see that. And just to give you some ideas, because you'll see there's a lot of tutorials and things out there on the internet. Some of them, personally, I think make it really hard to work in SketchUp, much harder than it really needs to be. So, and by the way, I've got a bunch of extensions on toolbars for extensions here. I'm not going to get into at least most of them. To me, this is a little bit like watching a video of somebody doing woodworking in their wood shop. And all of those toolbars are like the tools hanging on the wall behind them. And don't let that stuff keep you from doing SketchUp, doing woodworking, whatever it is. It's, those are just tools. So, I'm going to start. I've got the rectangle tool and I'm just going to drag this out. And by the way, down in the lower right corner, hopefully you can see this on my screen, kind of above the time and the temperature, there's some dimensions shown. And if I drag this out, you can see the size of the rectangle that I'm getting. And if I just type, in this case, I'm going to type 0.75 and 16. So that's 3/4 of an inch by 16 inches. And then I'm going to use the push-pull tool. And by the way, I may fall into the thing of using keyboard shortcuts. They're really useful. I think of those as sort of so the space I'm working in is sort of my workshop. The toolbars are the tools that are sort of close to hand or on the wall, or they're wherever in the tool tray on my bench. The keyboard shortcuts, I think of those as sort of the tools that I keep in the pockets of my apron. So they're really handy. And by the way, I'll do this a different way. I'm going to type 5 3/4. You can do that. That's how high I want to make that part. So now I've got a 3-dimensional thing. This is going to be the end of a case. And if I drag a selection box around that, I'm going to hit the G key and I'm going to create a component that I can give a name to. So I'll just call this case side. And so now I've got a part. And if I want to, let's say I'm going to need another end to this thing, I'm going to use the move tool and the copy function. And for those of you that are new to SketchUp, don't let this kind of the speed or whatever that I'm working at here deter you, because I want to get through modeling this thing so I can answer some questions. And so I'm maybe not going as slow as I might if I was really trying to just show the modeling of this particular piece. This is just a thing to get the point across. So in this case, I'm going to move this side down 23 1/4, so 23.25. And if let's not make another copy of that. If I measure that, you can see it's 24 inches now. So I've got a 24-inch wide case. And so if I get the rectangle tool again, and let's say I draw a rectangle from this point. So what I'm doing, and this is one thing that I've found is really useful, is I'm modeling in place. So once I've got my end pieces, I have the sort of the footprint of my case. So I don't need to know what the dimensions are for that. If I make that 3/4 of an inch, so I can type either 0.75 or 3/4. And the units are understood. And this time I triple clicked on that geometry, which selected all of it. And this time, and I hit G again to create a component, and top/bottom. And if I now select the move tool, so that's the M is the keyboard shortcut. That's the default. And if I put that up there, I now have a case with all my parts. And to keep things simple here, actually, I'm going to do a thing here real quick. I'm just going to flip that, which makes that a mirror image of the one on the left. But I'll do this a couple of different ways. I can open one of these for editing and make changes. But well, before I do that, let me talk about this. See how I've got my parts overlapping. That's a cool thing in SketchUp because you can lay out parts that are full size. You couldn't do that in the shop very easily, maybe with a really big hammer. But I can draw a diagonal across between those corners. And then there's the tool called push-pull. I can push that back. And I've just mitered the end of that piece. Another way to do that would actually be to use the move tool. So if I select that edge and come down to that corner there and repeat the process. And the neat thing here is, so if you could work in your shop with, and just take all of your measurements off of what you've already measured, of what you've already built, you'd have a whole lot easier time and you wouldn't have to work with any numbers. And you see, I've just now mitered all 4 corners of my box without knowing anything about dimensions or without entering any dimensions. So, and if I want to put, let's say I'm going to put a drawer front that's an overlay on here. I'm kind of working on a sort of a mid-century modern piece, but I've just drawn a rectangle. I don't even care what the size is for this thing. It just has to fit. So once I've started my model, everything just has to fit. That's the kind of the key here. So if I make that a component, so again, select it all, G, we'll call it a drawer front. And I've got a drawer. And I'm not going to go through the whole process of modeling the drawer here because it's more of the same sort of thing. But let me show you something else that's kind of neat. If I've got a component that I've created. Actually, I've got a bunch of components that I've created. So components are something that you can save in SketchUp to use later. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the move tool and I'm going to move this up. Whoop, come on, let's go straight up. Let's go straight up. I keep hitting my mouse. 12 3/8. Because I can take this and let's see, we'll put it there for the moment. Come on, you. It's going to the wrong place. There we go. I move that in now, let's say 3 inches. I've got a leg. So I've already done this leg component, leg and cleat thing. And in this case, I'm going to rotate that around 180 degrees. Come on, there you go. And we'll move that in about 2 inches. We'll call that good. That's a little bit farther than it needs to be, but so one of the things that's really cool about this is that you can have components that you've already created and you can save them to use for later projects. So you don't have to model things multiple times. If I go in here to say my knobs and pulls, this is probably not really appropriate for this particular piece of furniture, but put a drawer pull on it. That's something I modeled probably 10 years ago. And I still have that component. I can use it for projects now. And
So, Dave,
yeah,
does the free version allow you to save components?
yes, you can create components and then save them out to a local what's called a local collection, and use them later, you know. And I would highly recommend that. You know, for me, like when I go out to buy screws, I don't, you know, if I need 10 screws for a project, well, invariably you end up having to buy something stupid like 13 of them, right? It's never the right number of screws when you buy a package. But when I do that, I will buy a box of 50 or 100, right? And throw them into my collection of hardware in my shop. So I've got, I don't know, I've got lots of different hardware that I can go to choose from, which means now my wife will let me go to Menards and buy, or Rockler, or buy hardware. I've got to first look through what I've got and make sure I don't have something that'll work. But to me, this is the same sort of thing. So I don't make these components ahead of time thinking that someday I might use them. But when I have to make one, I do so, and then I save it as a component. So I've got it for the future.
Thanks, Dave. Say,
Yeah.
you've got, where could a person go to see the shortcuts that you keep in your apron?
You know what? I can send a file. I've got a thing that I can send, a PDF thing I could send you, and I'll send it. Should I send it to Matt and he can put it on somehow on the website or something?
You can send it to me, Dave, Mike Johnson.
Okay, I'll do that, Mike. And then, yeah, there's a lot of default keyboard shortcuts. I've set up a bunch. A lot of them will point to things like, well, to my extensions and things like that I've got. Let me do some.
Dave, you talk about creating your components. Are they also available someplace else?
I don't put my components out anywhere. There is the 3D warehouse, which is available with the SketchUp 2017 version. You have to access that through the web. It's not supported by the 3D warehouse. Doesn't support SketchUp 2017 make anymore, but it's a place where you can find hardware. Most of the components that I've created have been done for clients, so they aren't kind of really things I can share publicly. But there are a lot out there on the 3D warehouse that you can get. So let me do this. I'm going to save this file. I'll save as, and it doesn't need to go there. We'll put it in my, I don't know, we'll put it on the desktop. And I'm just going to call it a mid-century thing. I don't know what it is. I have to save it before I can do the next step. One of the nice things about SketchUp is you can, with the desktop versions, there are a whole lot of extensions available, and here's a whole long list. I don't want to go into all of these tonight, but scroll way down to the bottom. Why it shows up down there, I don't know, but there it is. There are a number of cut list extensions, and I'm going to add something to get my drawer pull to show up in the parts section. And I'm going to click run. Nothing was selected. Do I want to select it all? Use it all? Yes. And so here's just that quick. I've got a cut list that gives me the dimensions of all the parts. And if I scroll down here all the way, you can see my pull shows up in the other parts section. So I don't know how many board feet of drawer pulls I need, but who buys drawer pulls by the board foot anyway. So all of my parts are listed with the quantities and the dimensions. The foot or the leg is kind of an odd length because of the diagonal, but this can be a really handy thing when you need to go out and shop for lumber. And it happened that quickly. It'll happen that quickly on a much more complex model. So anyway, and this is a free extension. It's available from the extension warehouse. You can download it and install it into even SketchUp 2017 make. And it'll give you way more information than you actually probably need, but and if we had something that was supposed to be sheet materials, it would sort that into a sheet materials section. So very quick. And one of the things that I like about working in SketchUp, kind of the way I've done, where I laid out a couple of parts and then I've modeled everything else to fit, is that I don't need to know the information to get it into SketchUp. I want SketchUp to tell me. If I was going to have to know every single dimension to model this thing, I might as well just do it on paper. I might as well just write out my cut list manually. And I'll say that you can make your model as complex as you wish. You can make it as simple as you want. Don't put any more information into it than you absolutely need. But you can put in as much as you want. You can add textures, you can add hardware if you want to show screws, or I know a fellow who I wish I owned stock in Craig, because he loves pocket screws and he puts pocket screws in all of his SketchUp models. And I think he uses that many screws when he builds things in his shop. And I'm thinking I'd be kind of a rich guy if I had stock in Craig, because he keeps them going by himself. I don't know. Does anybody have any questions at the moment? Want to ask me anything? Would they like to see me do something in particular? Any of that kind of thing?
We have one question about a a member is making a shadow box and it
Okay,
has a fabric ribbon in it. And
okay.
is there a way that a fabric ribbon or a piece of fabric can be drawn in SketchUp?
Yeah, I mean, you can do something like, if it's just a straight thing, like maybe that sort of a thing. And if I just make that really thin, but make it very slightly three-dimensional, and I can add a material to that. You can add custom materials. I don't have a ribbon material right now, but if I go to my textiles thing, I could add some sort of, that's kind of the wrong size, but make that something like, I don't know, 2. So I'm going to add a texture, if that sort of thing answers the question. There's an extension, gets a little involved in getting into it, but there's an extension that's available called Clothworks. It's not available for free, but it'll actually drape fabric over something if that's what he's kind of after. Or there are other extensions that can, if I make that a component, I didn't give it a name. I kind of cheated there, but let's see here. I could do, so I'm not getting real deep into this, but I'm just gonna I'm using an extension called Freddo Scale that will, create a curved piece if that's what they're after, that kind of thing. You can, so there are tools out there that can do that kind of thing. I don't know exactly how the ribbon would be used.
Well, let me ask you, is there a way that you could convert a SketchUp file into something that a CNC machine would read?
Yes, well, yeah, you can export DXF files, for example, that can then be used for CNC stuff, but you need either SketchUp Pro or SketchUp Shop to be able to export vector files. So DXF is a vector type. SketchUp Make or SketchUp Free, the web version, don't offer that. There's also an extension called Faber that is set up for really specifically for getting CNC stuff out of SketchUp. Also, Vectric makes several different software options that will import a SketchUp file and generate files for CNC routing. So that might be worth looking into if you've got Vectric software. Again, it can take SketchUp files.
Do these extensions, are they available like in a warehouse, or where would?
Yes. So in there's what's called the extension warehouse, which, well, in 2021 they put this in the extensions menu. Prior to that, it was in the Windows menu, but in the window menu. But you can go to the extension warehouse and look for various and search for various extensions. Many of them are available for free. There are some that are commercially available. Another option is through a website called Sketchication. It's a web or a forum that's actually older than the Extension Warehouse, and they have more extensions. There's not a whole lot of crossover. There's a little, but not a whole lot of crossover between the two. So Sketchication is another source, another common source. And what I've got open here is the Sketchication extension store, which allows you to install extensions just by clicking the red button. If you look at the Extension Warehouse and you select, I don't know, let's take that one. I don't even know what that one is. There's an install button and you can install that. I don't read French, so I don't even know what that one's for. And once you've installed extensions through either the Extension Warehouse or the Extension Store, when there are updates, you can find out about those and update them. So lots and lots and lots of extensions available here. This is just some recent ones, but you can search, if there's something you're interested in doing, you can search, I don't know.
I've got a question here that I apologize, I don't understand. The question is, are all the drawings isometric?
No. So I'm working with the camera set, SketchUp's camera set to perspective. You can choose to use parallel projection and then an isometric view. Personally, I find that really jarring to look at. Most people don't get it when things look this way, because this isn't the way we see things in the real world. But you can also choose two-dimensional views if you want. So this is just a straight-on front view if you want a 2D view, or if I want to look at this from the side. And you can see I didn't get one of my legs positioned correctly, so let's fix that. We'll go back here. So you can choose to show your three-dimensional model in 2D if that's what you want. Let's do this. Let's go to, let me open a different file that's got a little more going on. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to one that I did for Fine Woodworking. Let's see. We'll use, let's see what that one does. I'm not going to say the changes to that. Yep, there we go. All right. So this is a bench that I did for Fine Woodworking for their tools and shops issue and created plans for it. So here's a perspective view, but I've got a 2D and I've created what are called scenes. So they're sort of fixed camera positions. So I've got a front view and a side view and a plan view. So looking straight down on the top. And by the way, here's a component that I made years ago for a different project. And conveniently, I saved that as a component and could use it here. So I didn't have to remodel all those screw threads and that whole vice screw to make that work.
So is it possible possible for you to like explode this view and lay it out on the board?
You can do that. You can pull the parts away from each other and lay them out. Like you might want to cut them out of view. What I do when I create an exploded view is I've got a copy of the model. And so my assembled copy that we were just looking at is over here by the origin where the red and green and blue axes come together. But I've got this other copy here. And of course, I don't have the top displayed here, but so I've created another scene with a separate copy to create an exploded view to use in the plans. So you can do this, and this I just did by you selecting components and moving them away from each other. One of the nice things when you create the components is they aren't attached to each other. So, you know, if I want to pull that leg out away from the rest of the model, I can do that because it's not stuck to it. So, so it's pretty easy to pull those things apart. If you wanted to do a layout sort of a thing, let's go back to here. I'm not going to do all of this, but let's just do some of it in that cut list extension. Scroll back down to the bottom of this list. Here we go. It does have an option to do a layout sort of a thing. And this may, I'm not setting this up, so it may not be exactly the way we would really want to run it, but it'll show the parts laid out on boards. Now, my personal feeling is that for stuff made out of solid wood, this is not a particularly useful thing because you need to cut out for grain and around flaws in the wood and that sort of thing. But for sheet materials, it's really pretty nice. So you don't really have to do the layout manually, but you could if you wanted to.
Dave, it does give you a good idea about how many boards you ought to be looking for.
Right, right. There is that. Of course, this is sorting them sort of by thickness. So these first two pieces are out of a 1 3/4 inch thick board, and the next one is out of 1 7/8. So they're kind of thick pieces, but yeah, you're right. You get an idea of how many boards you might need. So, you know, of course, obviously here, you might lop this thing off and then plane this unused section down to, or you might start with the 1 7/8, lop this section off and plane the rest of it to 1 3/4 and get some more parts out of it, you know, that kind of thing. So
once you make a component, can you call it back up and modify it?
yes, so you can open the component for editing. So you can either right click on it and choose edit component. Let's do that again. Edit component. I normally don't go for it up there. I usually just double click on it and open it for editing. And one of the neat things about this, well, let me just do it to this thing here. Let's say we want to put a hole in this. So I've got the circle tool and I'm just going to drag out a circle of undefined radius. So I've just put a hole in that thing. And if we go over here to the copy over here, whatever I did to the one component gets done to any other instance of the component in the model, which can make you kind of soft, because when you go to the shop, you know, if you've got like you got 4 or 5 parts, 4 parts of like drawer sides or something, and you cut the dovetails in one of them. In SketchUp, the other copies get the same dovetail joint. But in the shop, you still have to handle all four of them. So you're, but yeah, you don't have to do that same thing over and over with the component. The other thing is for something like this, do I want to do this here? Yep. No, I don't. I'm going to just undo that because I don't want to get into my mortise. There's a mortise on the other side of this thing, but we can undo is our friend here. But yes, you can make modifications to a component once you've created it. That's also a really nice thing in that if your project changes, let's look at that thing here. Oh, come on. So maybe the client says they want the bench to be another foot longer. We can modify the thing very quickly. Oops, I can go on the axis there. So you can modify it the wrong way, of course. But you can also, I won't do the entire model this way, but you can see that my components over here are getting longer. Maybe I'll make another shelf board. I just made a copy with the move tool. Actually, maybe I'll end up doing this after all. That one, I'm just going to use push-pull. So now I've just made the bench another foot longer than it had been. So it's really nice, especially if you've got to get somebody else's approval and they say, can you make it bigger? Can you make it smaller? Whatever. It's kind of nice to do that before you're committed to making sawdust.
Well, one of our members has asked if you can show us how to make a mortise and tenon in SketchUp.
Sure, let's do this. I'm gonna start with a new thing. So let's do, I don't know, 1.375. We'll make a small leg. And we'll make it, I don't know, I'm gonna make it kind of short here. We'll just make it 12 inches tall. So I'm going to make that a leg. I'm going to show you two different ways to do this. So this is going to be a leg. And then let's put an apron on there. And we'll make that, I don't know, 4 by 3/4. And I'm going to, and I won't do the other end of it. So I'll just pull it out a little ways. And to make it so you can see what I'm doing here, I'm going to go ahead and make that a component. We'll call it apron. And then I'm going to switch to the X-ray mode so we can see through the leg. And I'm going to create a tenon, basically a third of the thickness, right? 1/4 inch, that'd be common. So I'm going to use the offset tool. I'm going to come in here. Let's come in 1/4 inch. And I'm going to pull that out, let's say 1 inch. So I've got 1 inch long tenon. So that's done. Now what I can do, and so the neat thing here is I've put the tenon in the leg and there's no mortise yet, right? So I could lay out the mortise just like I would lay it out in the shop with lines and then draw it. But what I can do here is I can open the leg for editing. And I can use, so I've got the rectangle tool, and what I'm doing is I'm tracing the base of the tenon. And it's maybe a little there, you can kind of see that. And now if I use push pull on that face, so P again for the push pull tool. Now, of course, that's not allowing for any, usually you cut the mortise a little bit deeper than you make the tenon, than the length of the tenon, but that's a perfect fit and it's perfectly laid out for where the apron is. Because I use the tenon as the guide for doing that. So if I'm going to switch out of X-ray there, and I'm just going to move a copy of this out. And you can see there's my mortise. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to pull a copy out. So I just did a bunch of Control Z's. I need to do another Control Z. Both there. All right. So now I shouldn't have a mortise. And I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut for this, but there are a couple of different tools available. One of them is called Bool Tools 2, which will work in SketchUp Make, and it will trim. It'll use one component to trim another. I've got a keyboard shortcut for that, and I'll use this to trim that. And I've got a mortise. Bool Tools 2 is not a free extension, but for the time it can save you, it's pretty, I think it's pretty well worth it. So if I pull this back, you can see I've got the mortise in the original leg as well. Anymore, I don't draw mortises. I draw tenons and make the tenons cut the mortises.
Can you dimension this or show us how
Yes.
to dimension a drawing?
Yeah. So in the tools, dimensions. And we can put in, let's go here, and we'll come here and come up there, and we can put in whatever dimensions we think we need. That one, I don't like where that is, so I'm going to do text position outside end. So I just right clicked on that to get that. And we can come down here, and so we can do all of that kind of dimensioning that we want. And you can add labels. So if I go to text and I want to, I don't even have to type anything because it's taking the component's name. So I can do that sort of thing if I want. So lots of capability as far as that's concerned. A lot more of that capability when you get into Pro and then using layout, because you can do things like, let's go back to here, and I'll zoom in on this. So all of this text, and this is kind of not so good because this is an image made from my plan, so it doesn't look real sharp, but all of this text was put in automatically in layout by putting a label on, so I don't have to type all that stuff. And there are dimensions, like these that go in. And all of this stuff here comes from running that cut list extension. So you can get all that information back out of SketchUp if you want.
So Dave, there's, you kind of know my story. I'm just a neophyte kind of the SketchUp. would you, how do I put it? What are the 3 most used tools?
I would say the 3 most used tools are probably the rectangle tool, push pull. So the rectangle tool gets you a shape that you can then use push pull to make 3-dimensional, and the move tool, because the move tool is used to move things around, to make copies, to sort of to build your model. But pretty much I haven't done anything except for that hole that I drew. I haven't done anything as far as modeling without, other than just using those 3 tools. You can build a ton of things with just, and that's the thing, like with woodworking, there are those of us who buy every shiny tool that comes out, all those one-time tools, that we get emails about. And that's fine. But a lot of us work with, not much and manage to make amazing stuff in our shops. And I'm thinking about my brother, whose woodworking shop is very rudimentary, and compared to my shop, it's like he doesn't have hardly any tools at all, but he puts my woodworking to shame. He does much better woodworking than I do. And of course, he's a machinist by training, and he works that way in his shop, which makes me nuts. But so I think there's a few other tools. For example, in fact, let me just do a quick thing here. So I'm not worrying about dimensions this time. I'm just kind of drawing something, and it doesn't have to be, it's not going to be pretty. But another tool that's really useful is, especially if you're into the round stuff, is the follow me tool. Because you can make round stuff. You can make it a whole lot more complex than that, obviously, but or you can, let me back up here a little bit. And say we want to make a leg that's, and obviously the dimensions are a little weird here, but say you want to make a leg and you just want the inside or the outside 2 faces to be concave. So I just used the follow me tool. A few years ago, I had a fellow contact me about 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday saying he was trying to model a leg that very much like what I've just done here. And he was having a hard time, and could I show him how to do it? So I set up a web sharing session, and I did exactly the same thing I'm doing here. I selected those 2 edges, and I got the follow me tool, and I clicked on this, and it was done. And he said, can you show me that again slower? And there isn't any slower. That's as slow as it goes. And then he said, I hate you. He said, I've been trying to do this since 6 o'clock this morning, and I'm still in my pajamas. And in a few seconds, there it was. And I wished I could have had a justification for more tools. But anyway, for using more tools, but follow me can be a really useful tool for creating details and things like that.
Do you find it easier to operate SketchUp with a mouse or a sketch pad or a mouse with a wheel, or what tools?
So I've got a very simple basic mouse with a mouse button / wheel. So there's the zoom. And if I press the mouse wheel down, and if I had it on something, you can see that. So now the program was designed for a mouse like that. I've tried using a touchpad and it drives me nuts. I find it really clumsy. There are some people that like to do SketchUp with a stylus on like a Wacom tablet type thing. That also makes me crazy. But it doesn't have to be an expensive mouse, as long as it's got a center mouse wheel / button. Pressing the button gets you orbit, and scrolling gets you zoom. And if you hold the shift key with the mouse button, center mouse button, then you get pan, so you can move it left to right. One thing about SketchUp, we're representing a 3-dimensional space here. So it's really like you're looking at your project in the shop rather than a painting of it or a pencil drawing of it. So you want to look at it that way. So you need to be able to look at your model from all directions. And so getting used to this navigation is really good. And you'll know you've got SketchUp when somebody sends you a photograph, or you're looking at a picture on a website and you push that center mouse wheel and try to orbit and it doesn't go. And everybody laughs at me when I say that. And they come back later and tell me they tried to orbit when they were looking at a photograph. And so I know then they have SketchUp ingrained. So.
How about photo rendering in SketchUp?
SketchUp itself doesn't do photo rendering. There are a variety of rendering applications, and some of them have extensions that can be run. So they kind of look like they're running in SketchUp. They'll open a separate window. There's lots and lots of rendering applications out there. I use an old freeware version called Kirkithia that works well for me. I'm in no way, shape, or form qualified to teach somebody else how to use it, but I get what I want out of it. And I don't do an awful lot of that in the first place, but that one is an option. V-Ray is a real common one. There's some others out there, many other rendering applications. So if you want to do that, it's certainly a possibility. I was going to open another file here. Let's go up here. More questions?
Yeah, we have a question about how would you use, if at all, layers in SketchUp?
So layers are a thing. They're not like in, actually, let's go back to the workbench that I had open. And we'll come back to this one. So, and with 2019, they changed layers. They call them tags now. They never acted like layers like you would have in like AutoCAD or in Photoshop or something. Layers are a visibility control thing. So for example, here I've got a tag or a layer for the vise hardware. And if I turn that off, actually it's the vise chop. If I go to the vise hardware, I can turn that off. So it's really just a thing for controlling the visibility. So the objects, the components in the model are given a tag or a layer. And if I select the vise hardware here, you can see the up in the upper right here in the entity info, it shows the tag as Vice Hardware. So you can determine what's being shown. So when I go to this exploded view, for example, the top isn't being shown. I've turned the top off, but if I turn the tag back on, the top components show. So it's really just a visibility control thing. And it does not separate parts from each other. You have to make components or groups. I don't use groups. I only use components because it's more consistent and a more consistent workflow. And because if I edit one of them, I know any other instances of them will get edited at the same time. So they're all components, but we'll see this one that I've got selected as a long stretchers tag. So if I turn off that, deselect that thing, but the long stretchers go away when I turn that off.
So I'm not trying to, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. How about on curves? Could you draw a cabriole leg?
I could. It's really involved, and I don't know if anybody wants to stay here long enough for me to do that. A cab leg is really a challenge to do well. You can certainly represent a cabriole leg. I'm not even going to worry about dimensions here. I'm just going to draw something. You could make it really simple. So it might be, and I'm going to use an extension here to draw part of this that creates a Bezier curve. And I'm just eyeballing this thing. So close enough. All right. By the way, I used an extension called Bezier Spline for that. So I'm going to use follow me. And there's the outside of it, but obviously it doesn't have the rounded edge. Getting that to be a smooth rounded thing gets to be more of a challenge. And actually, if I were to do something like that, I might be thinking like that, and that's not exactly right, but actually it's not right at all, but kind of gives the idea. But you can sort of fake that. I really need to do that inside differently than I did, but in terms of simplified and not keeping everybody here till the sun comes up. Maybe that kind of gets the idea across.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I've done serious cabriole legs, and I will admit they are kind of time consuming to model. You probably just about carve one out in about the time it takes to make one in SketchUp. So it's the sort of thing you want to kind of think about, whether how badly do you need a digital model of the thing.
What about adding wood grain or a wood tone like cherry or?
You can do that. So there are some textures that are, let me go back to that. This cabinet here. So you can, there are some wood grain materials that are available. In the wood section. They aren't particularly realistic. Do that. And there's a cherry and it's huge. I don't know why it's 6 feet square because it doesn't really belong, shouldn't really be. But for example, there's, if I make that 12 inches square, that'd pass for wood grain. The pine that I have here is a material that I took some images of some full length boards and I imported the images into SketchUp as materials to create my own wood grain textures. Let's undo that and get back to that. So I use a full length board, and in fact, let's do something, I don't know, we'll make it 8 feet long by 12 inches wide. And we'll go into my in model materials, and this is just one of the textures position. This was a really large board, but you can kind of see the and I don't use real high resolution images because they can really bloat the file size. So if I get in really close, they're pretty fuzzy. But it makes the, in this case, I'm using a really large image and I can pick different parts out of that board, in air quotes, to use for different parts of my project. So, here I've got 4 drawer fronts. Technically they all have the same material on them, but I'm using different parts of it, just like you'd use different parts of a real board if you were gonna cut those out. In fact, if I go in here all the way, you can see I can pick different parts of that board then to use. See, it's quite large compared to the project, so I can use, I can move that and pick a different section of the board to use. So you can make very nice wood grain materials if you want, and it's really just a matter of importing the image as a texture and applying it to your faces. And this is a lot like the hardware components that I've collected over the years. If I need a new wood species, I go hunting or I take my own photographs of long boards and import those into SketchUp and create new materials. So over the years, I've collected quite a few different species of wood materials to use. So
is it, can you show us how to make a profile on the edge of a mitered joint?
A profile. So just creating a miter, or
No, more of like an OG.
oh, so let's do something like, I don't know, I'm just going to make a square that's 12 inches, and we'll pull that up to 3/4 of an inch, and we're going to put an OG curve on there. So maybe we would have, I don't know, we'll put it on the top. Actually, I'm going to use the tape measure tool. The tape measure tool will put in guidelines and guide points. I think of these as sort of pencil lines or chalk lines. Let's go in a 1/2 inch there, and we'll come down here, I don't know, 1/16. And I don't know, 0.5. We'll come down 1/2 an inch. So I'm going to start with a little line segment there. And I'm going to use the classic Bezier curve from that Bezier Spline tool. You could do this with just, does that count as an OG curve? And now I'm going to, so I'm going to put this around like it might be a tabletop, and maybe it's inverted, I don't know, but so I've selected the top of this panel, and I'm going to use the follow me tool. And there's my profile all the way around. Kind of like running a router around it. So if you can draw the router profile, whatever it is you want, you can run that as a, do you think that answers the question?
I believe so. If it doesn't, the person will kind of like, you
You
hit me
idiot.
again.
You idiot, Richards. That wasn't
Well,
what I meant.
you got a middleman here to blame.
Well, no.
Tell me that you keep talking about this Bezier tool. How
Yeah,
do you
so
spell that?
So Bezier, and the one I've been using, let's go in here. The one I've been using is Bezier Spline tool. Right here. From Fred 06, and it's available from Sketchication, Bezier Spline. It's got a lot of different curve drawing tools for what I'll say are non-circular curves. SketchUp on its own will do circles and arcs. But for non-circular stuff, Bezier Spline is a really nice one. Another one is Freddo Spline, which is also by the same guy and works a little differently. I have both of them, but the Bezier curve tool, you start with by identifying the ends, and then you can draw curves, and I don't know, I'll come over here, double click to set the last point, but now I can choose to edit these, and I can even add more points if I want, and modify that curve. So that can be a very handy tool. One thing I should point out here, because it's very obvious, is SketchUp simplifies curves to straight line segments. And for the most part, that works just fine, and most people won't see those curves anyway. You can, like with this tool, I can increase the number of segments up to 48. Come on. And let's do something here, 48S, and smooth that out. So I can add more segments to it if I need to. You have to be careful with that, because you can really bloat the geometry in your model if you do that. But sometimes that is a good idea to do.
Is that a free tool?
It recently became a commercial extension. So I forget, I think it's like a one-time, I don't remember what it is, $8 or something. The author just at the beginning of this month converted it to a for pay extension. He's got about, I think there's 8 or 10 extensions that if you buy the whole bundle, it's $40. And they're all pretty useful tools.
So Dave, when you had that profile go all the way around
Mhm.
your box there, you just drew the profile, you selected.
I
all
selected
four?
the top mostly because I wanted the edges selected. So I just double clicked on the top face to select those edges. And then you get the follow me tool. And
Oh, okay, I see what you did there.
click on the profile.
Yep.
The neat thing about follow me is if I undo all of that, so I'm going to get rid of my, come on, get it. Okay, well, I won't, I'll just delete those things, whatever. Follow me is, actually, let's put those back because I can do this. So I'm going to use the rotate copy function. So now I've got that as like a molding that was going to be applied. And took that out, but no big deal. I will just, normally it doesn't do that because I have that separated, but oh, I see what my problem is. Let's fix that. See if that works better. There's what I wanted to do. So now I've just added, instead of subtracting, I've added a molding, you know, like that might be a crown molding, right? I've just added that to the model. So it's kind of a slick way to create moldings or profiles. Again, I think of this as like running a router around the board. Or running it on a shaper if I add a shaper. Are people falling asleep?
No, I'm still here.
Yeah, I think things are starting to wind down a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, we've lost a few people.
We've
about
lost a few, but
Uh,
we still got 63 people, so we're still doing
Well,
good.
that's good. Well, I didn't want to lose anybody, but hopefully people are getting something, seeing something.
Yeah. So Dave, you were pretty adamant about not self-promoting the things that you do and you sell, but I happen to be watching Shop Talk Live, the Fine Woodworking podcast.
Oh,
And
yeah?
I happened to catch a commercial for Foundations of Woodworking. So you're going to be teaching a class called SketchUp Fundamentals for Furniture Design. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I didn't even know they did that. So they're talking about it. I haven't been telling anybody because I didn't know it was public yet.
So I went to they gave a link to go to. I went to it, and it's kind of a place where you could sign up if you're interested. There's really no other information about it. So is there a cost to it? And is it like a one-day program?
They have a cost. To be honest, I don't know what that is, but they are running. So basically, I'm recording some videos that they're going to release. They'll be in fairly short chunks. And the way I understand this, they'll be releasing them like on a weekly basis. I think starting in June. And then after they release, there will be a time scheduled for a live Q&A. And so then people can ask me questions. I'm going to go through the process of creating a model, kind of showing my workflow as I go through it, talk about, things I'm thinking about as I create a model, and hopefully show some good workflow habits that make, the thing about SketchUp in my mind is that it's an incredible tool, but at the end of the day, no matter what you do in SketchUp, you still don't have a table that you can eat dinner at or a chair you can sit on. So you want what you do in SketchUp to be really efficient, and you want it to inform what you do in your shop. So one of the very first projects that I ever built after designing in SketchUp was a big shop cabinet. And I built it out of stuff that was left over, 2x4s and 2x6s and some plywood that was left over from a shed that I built the year before. And it had been sitting in my shop all winter and drying out. And I designed this cabinet so I didn't have to buy any more materials than I absolutely had to. But when I went out to the shop to build it, it was like I'd built it for the third or fourth time. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew every setup I needed to make. So I never had to set the table saw up a second time to do the same cut. I never had to plane anything again to the same thickness. I knew everything. And I started building that shop cabinet at like 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. And by 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, I was moving into it, filling it with stuff. And I've never built anything that quickly in my life. Usually the wood for my projects petrifies before I'm done with it. And I attribute that to having built it in SketchUp and thinking about it in terms of how would I do this in the shop. So like I was saying with the, putting the molding or the profile on this, I think about that as running a router around it. So that's kind of the stuff that I'm thinking about as far as what I'm going to present, in this project or in this series of videos. And we'll use I'm actually going to use a case piece by Mike Pekovich, one of the editors at Fine Woodworking, and use that as a model to start with and show that workflow. So hopefully people will get an idea. So, but I haven't been on the sort of that end of it where about signing up for, if you're interested or whatever, and I have no idea what they're charging for it.
Okay, so basically it sounds like you're getting like a exclusive membership or exclusive access to these videos that will come out periodically, and then there'll be a scheduled Q&A session.
Right.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be at least 6. I may end up dragging it out into 7 or 8 episodes or modules or whatever I forget what they're calling them. But so as you can tell, I can talk for a long time if I have to, or if nobody shuts me up. Yeah. I think it'll be a good thing, and I hope that people will get something useful out of it. So
my understanding is there's another product on the market that's similar to SketchUp, like Fusion 360 is what it's called. How does it compare to SketchUp?
Well, so Fusion 360 is more, it's a web-based product. It's more of a, it's more designed for like machinist type CAD stuff. I tried using it. Some people like it, and that's great. I found it really clumsy, but I do SketchUp when I'm driving. I look at things when I'm driving down the road and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll draw that. I would draw that this way, and I'd use push pull, and I'd use this tool, and I'd do that. And so I model this stuff. I've been doing it in SketchUp so long that I think I'm broken for learning other software, but I find Fusion 360 to be really clumsy and not very intuitive at all. But that's just me. Some people like it. Again, it's web-based. It's really deep. It's got there's some interesting things about Fusion 360, like it's parametric, which means that like when I was modifying this workbench, in a parametric program, I could have set up the workbench so that if I moved the legs, the top would have gotten longer with it. But I haven't found that kind of thing to be as all that useful for me, and I don't have a problem making modifications to my SketchUp models. And in fact, I kind of like doing it manually because it gives me a chance to think about what's changing in the model rather than having things moving. So, but I think that anybody who's just starting with 3D modeling ought to look at these different applications and see what they think. Maybe Fusion 360, maybe they talk through Fusion 360 better than I do. Maybe it makes more sense to some people than it does to me. Apparently it does, because there are a lot of people using it. So it's worth checking out these different options. I'm a volunteer with the local First Robotics team, and they use another program called Onshape, which is also a web-based CAD program. Incredibly powerful. I'm supposed to know how to use it. I just can't wrap my head around it. It's so much faster for me to model something in SketchUp, and so
I would imagine it's what you know what you've learned, kind of like do you use Mac, do you use Windows, do you use Google?
yeah.
Right? So it's
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
go and try and use Google Docs and I fumble around. I'm used to Word, used to
Well,
Microsoft.
yeah, and even those aren't even all that much different, and I have a hard time with going back and forth. But yeah, I think it's what you're used to, and I think some people's brains are wired one way and some are wired another way. And for me, I can, and when I watch people working in Onshape with the robotics team, for me, it's very painful to watch them work because it looks so much slower, and they're screwing around making parts and bringing them in and putting them together. And one of the things that I did here when I drew that little cabinet that I put the legs under was I modeled things in place where they're going to be. And I don't see that happening in Fusion 360 or Onshape. Maybe it can be done, but what I see people demonstrating is they have to go model every part individually, and they have to know all the dimensions to make that part before they can put it together in an assembly. And to me, that's just too much work. You might as well just go out to the shop and start cutting parts if I know all that information. But that's just me. So,
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions. I think we could probably wind the evening down. I think it's been pretty informative. Definitely appreciate you taking the time to join us and share your knowledge.
well, my pleasure. I'm glad to do it. And I hope that there was something good. Hopefully people got something useful out of it. And,
We had many positive comments.
oh, good.
Some even calling it great.
Well, that's going a long way.
There are a couple of comments.
Everyone extending their heartfelt thanks.
Well, there are a couple of comments we haven't touched on. One was, is there a cost for this? Somebody missed that. I think they may have joined a little bit late. If you could kind of recap on that, Dave.
So, yeah, $1 million. Just send me a check. No, no. So there are different versions of SketchUp. There are a couple that are available at no charge for hobby use. One of them is SketchUp 2017 Make, which is available from that link, the download/all link. And then there's a free web version that you can get to through app.sketchup.com. They also have a web-based version called Shop that is $119 a year is the subscription price. And then SketchUp Pro, which I've been using, which is currently $299 a year. And both Shop and Pro are licensed for commercial use, as well as, you know, certainly hobbyists could use it, but certain for commercial use, you'd use one of those. So
Good. And then another question was, one of our members says he recalls that punching a hole all the way through a part can sometimes be tricky. Have you experienced issues in this area? And if so, do you have tips to share?
What?
yeah. Well, it depends on the hole, and it depends on what you're hitting at the other end. And I've seen some cases. So here, what I'm going to do, I've just drawn a circle on this surface. And if I use the push-pull tool and push through to the opposite side, I get a hole.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, I could push too far and then I don't have, then it's not a hole. Or if, and I've seen this, I see this more with architectural things where I do something like, it's a little hard to make these things happen without some forced setup. I'm going to make that so it's very obviously that back face is not parallel to the front. And now if I do the same thing and try to go through, it doesn't punch the hole because that back face is not parallel. So there are cases where you can create geometry where that doesn't work very well. If this was the shape and you wanted the hole to go through that, the way you fix that is push it all the way or push it past. Select those two surfaces. And I'm right-clicking here to bring up the context menu. I'm going to do intersect faces with selection, because now I can delete that and that and that, and I have a hole. Yep. So there are ways to deal with more complex geometry if you want or need to. If the faces are parallel, it should be pretty straightforward. So. Hopefully that.
Well, you just got invited to a cabin near
I did.
Ellendale, Minnesota.
Where?
Ellendale, Minnesota.
Oh.
Okay. And for walleye and pan fish fry and talking woodworking and SketchUp.
Wow.
That was Patrick Ahern.
Wow. Let's see, I'll be getting in my car right after we get done here. Wow, that's really nice, Patrick. And of course I'm hungry. So.
Well, Dave, Patrick's also wondering, do you do in-person classes around Rochester? It sounds like he lives down in the area.
Oh, does he? Okay. So in-person classes, I can do in-person classes. I did some stuff through the local community ed program a few years ago, but what I found is it was a little like herding cats, because there were some people that didn't know which button was the left mouse button, and there were people that had been using SketchUp for a while, and it was hard to keep everybody pointed in the same direction. So I do one-on-one stuff. I can do it in person. I do a lot online. In fact, I've got students in England and Australia and Hawaii and California and, well, pretty much all over the United States that I work with on a pretty regular basis. So if Patrick wants to get together and do SketchUp stuff, we can do that. We can work out. Things are a little busy right now, but we can work things out, especially for walleye. So
he can just contact you through your email?
yeah, so I'll put that back up there in case. I'm always open to answering emails. I might not get back to you right away because, like I said, things are kind of busy. But I'm supposed to be a retired guy. I'm almost wishing I could go back to my old day job, so because it'd be a lot less work. No, I really like this. But if people want to email me with questions or whatever, I'm happy to try to answer. If they've been using SketchUp and they're trying to do something and they can't make it work, send me the SketchUp file too, so I can see what it is. I can usually figure out either what's going on or, a different way to make it work. So.
I think we should wrap this one up, guys. This has been great. Dave, just lots of accolades coming on the chat line.
Well, thank you all. And thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate this. It's kind of cool to get to talk to a bunch of woodworkers.
Hey, you're not too far. You should think about joining the guild.
Well, maybe that might be a thing.
Well, if you're not doing anything the weekend of the 21st of April, you might want to come up and see our Fine Woodworking exhibition.
Where's that?
It's at Eden Prairie Center.
Oh, right in the mall?
In the mall, yeah.
Oh, cool.
In the what they call the rotunda, I think.
Okay. It's been 100 years since I've been there.
April 21 through the 24th, mall hours.
Well, I might I'll have to see if I can make that. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to meet a bunch of people, and hopefully everybody will be coming in to volunteer and help.
They usually show up. It just makes us really nervous when when they don't tell us they're coming.
Come on, everybody. Just volunteer. Don't make the guys nervous. So, all right.
Well, thanks, Dave.
Thank you. And yeah, like I say, I appreciate it. So.
I think with that, we're going to call this a wrap and sign off for everybody. In a few days, you'll be able to find this up on YouTube, and we'll send an email to everybody and let them know.
All right, I'm gonna stop my sharing here.
And we'll
There we
say
go.
good night to everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Good night. Thanks all.
Yep, thanks, everyone.